and welcome to Horror Rewind. This is Kelly Florence,
And this is Mark Florence.
and today we're talking about scary stories to tell in the dark. Now, we saw this movie on opening night, and since we saw it, the Rotten Tomatoes has been posted, and it's considered 81% fresh. Guillermo del Toro came up with the story, and he also produced the movie, but this is based on the children's books that came out in the 80s and 90s. 1981, 1984, and 1991. Alvin Schwartz wrote them, and they were illustrated by Stephen Gammell. Now, I never read these books. Mark, did you?
I do think I had one of them, yes.
Okay, well, that's cool. Yeah, I don't know why I missed out on them, but I did for some reason.
They were good. They were short stories with the illustrations, kind of cartoonish illustrations, and they weren't super scary, so they were good for a, 10 to 14-year-old kid.
That's interesting that you say that because I was reading a little history on the books, and there were a bunch of groups, particularly Christian groups, who tried to get these books banned from all school libraries because they said they were too violent, too scary, and the illustrations were too gruesome. And so I was like, huh. I mean, this movie was rated PG-13 because these are children's books. I know I saw some people mad that it wasn't going to be rated R, but I think they made the right choice.
Yeah, I disagree with taking that book out of libraries. It wasn't, nothing was too over the top. It was, pretty innocent. Yeah, the PG-13 on the movie, if you hadn't told me that, I honestly wouldn't have known. It was pretty scary, some pretty creepy visuals, not a lot of excess blood or violence, but it's still got the job done.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so this movie, I don't know about the books, but this movie they set in the year 1968. And I think that was such an excellent choice for setting the movie because you avoid the problem of cell phones, which it seems like now every modern movie, could be solved by technology somehow. But 1968, what a fun year.
Yeah, I was thinking that when I was watching the movie right away, that if I were to make a movie, I would make it in modern times because it's just so much more work to make it, any other time. You have to buy all the cars, make the exteriors and interiors look period, like they're from that period. And, if you're in a store, you have to have everything perfect from that period because, there's nitpickers out there that'll call you out on it.
Yeah, I know. It must be difficult to work in an era and make sure that like the language is correct and everything. I mean, I guess 1968 isn't so far away that we can't imagine how people spoke, of course, but I like that through line of showing Nixon and in the election. This starts days before the election, I assume, because it was on Halloween.
Yeah, and during the Vietnam War, and one lady said you can't trust a guy named Tricky Dick to be your president. So, and we all know what happened after that.
Yeah, topical. I love this main character of Stella. She is my hero. First of all, she loves horror. Has glasses, which I am always saying let's get more female leads and male leads, but more leads with glasses. And I can't remember the third thing I love about her.
The horror stuff?
Well, no, I know that she loves horror. Well, oh, I love too that they showed that she has freckles and everything and didn't try to cover her freckles up. But I love Stella. Oh, I know what the third thing was. She wants to be a writer. Mark, this character.
She's totally you. I wrote that down in my notes during the movie, and in my notes it says, girl reminds me of Jelly with horror stuff in her room, but I think that means, I'm pretty sure that means Kelly.
Aw, that was me. Now, something funny. This love interest that she meets. What is his name now? Is it? I want to say it's Raul. Ramon. We should look it up for sure. But he and she meet at Night of the Living Dead at the drive-in, and I turned to you and I said, "Aw, they bond over their love of horror, just like you and me." And I said that as a joke, but first of all, do you remember the first two movies we saw together?
I'm pretty sure it was Dumb and Dumber and 8 Mile. In the 8 Mile in the movie theater.
Okay, so that is wonderful because those are the first two movies we saw together when we were dating. But do you know the first actual two movies we saw together? We saw them before we were dating. It was Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Ring. So our first two movies together, even though we weren't together, were horror movies. So we really did bond over horror, Mark.
Just like Ramon and Stella in the movie, yep.
So I said it ironically, but it was actually true. Okay, I just think that's amazing.
I do remember seeing The Ring with you and Meg and Luke in the movie theater. Then you had to drive home by yourself up to your house, and I told Luke that we should call your answering machine since this was like pre-cell phone days and leave a message like however the noise like
7 days.
7 days.
Remember the message would be like, "Ree," and then say 7 days?
Yeah, I wanted to leave a message like that, but thankfully Luke was sensible enough not to do that.
Well, I'm glad that he talked you out of it because I did live alone out in the country and that movie scared the crap out of me. I mean, it's still one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. And I would not have responded well to that. That would have been scary. I did not have cornfields surrounding my house like in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, but that would have only added to my fear.
I'm really glad we didn't do that, and I apologize for even ever considering it, Kelly. I'm sorry.
No, I forgive you. I mean, it's fine. You're such a prankster that I'm actually surprised you didn't go through with it. Now, as I mentioned, this movie.
I was just gonna say I didn't have your phone number, so I couldn't do it.
Boo! Okay, so this movie starts on Halloween, and they're going out and they've got their Halloween costumes. I love how the one guy, Augie, I think his name is, he's dressed like a clown, but he really is saying like, no, it's Commedia dell'arte, and I love that because I was a theater major. The other guy's supposed to be Spider-Man, but he ends up just kind of being a silly spider, and then Stella's a witch.
I was gonna say that one guy's clown costume reminded me of Michael Myers' costume when he was a kid, and then Michael Myers' niece's costume in part 4. So
Yeah, good eye. So speaking of Halloween, do you have any memorable Halloween costumes from your childhood? What do you remember being?
I was Michael Myers once with the blue jumpsuit, the mask, and like a fake knife.
Nice.
I was a little older, so I was pretty tall and big. So, and I think I even sat on my front porch next to a bowl of candy, like pretending I was a dummy, and there was a sign by the candy that said "Please take one" or something, and then I'd sit there, and then people would walk up and then think I was fake, and then I'd scare them. So that was pretty fun.
That's awesome. Now, my most memorable Halloween costume in my mind was I was in first grade and it was the first year that I like chose what I was going to be, and I chose to be the Bride of Frankenstein. So my dad put it together with me, and I probably didn't look as terrifying as I thought I did, but I love that.
That's awesome. I mean, you are this girl in the movie, and you were meant and destined to do Horror Rewind later in life.
It's all led to this moment, people. Now, they were watching Night of the Living Dead, which was my first horror movie on VHS. They were watching it at a drive-in movie theater, which is lovely and nostalgic. Have you ever been to a drive-in?
Yeah, when I was growing up in the Twin Cities area, there was one out east where Woodbury is now, off Highway 94, that we saw the movie with Clint Eastwood, where he's like a bodyguard for the president.
In the Line of Fire. John Malkovich is in that, right?
I think so. Yeah, he might be the bad guy, and Clint Eastwood like dives in front of the president at the end to take a bullet.
Spoiler alert.
And then there was a movie after that, but I remember falling asleep because it was like 1 a.m. or something. And then there was also another drive-in in Maplewood, Minnesota, where I went a few times. I remember you could either tune it into a certain radio station, but for whatever reason that didn't work in our car, so we had to hang the little thing, like radio thing, in your window, but then you had to have your window cracked open, and mosquitoes would get in your car, so that was not fun.
Oh, that's the problem with drive-ins in Minnesota. We used to have a drive-in. It was between where we lived in the country and town, because it was kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And I do remember going there when I was little, and then it was gone. No more drive-ins.
Where exactly was it?
Between it's like where there's like a big manufacturing thing now, like a manufacturing building towards Hibbing. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean that's a good spot for it. So I'm sad that that wasn't there when I lived up there.
I know it would have been fun. Um, there's this first, well, or in the beginning, they are being mean to this scarecrow named Harold, and I turn to you and I'm like, this is not going to go well because you should not be mean to scarecrows because first of all they're creepy AF, and I just knew that Harold was not going to like it.
I even wrote Harold is creepy AF in my notes. They did a great job uh, with the visual of Harold. He's all haggard and old looking, and he had these like huge like bugs or beetles like always crawling out of his eyes on his face. And even though he was a scarecrow, he looked mean and um, scary. So you could tell right away that this was going to come into play later.
You know what I love about this movie, just taking it in as a whole? It is absolutely a horror movie, and it's scary and it's creepy, but not in the way that, some movies are. So I feel like even if you're not a horror fan, or even if you're not an adult, obviously this is PG-13, you can go to it and it's not going to traumatize you. It's going to give you the creeps. And I love that.
Yeah, I feel like they looked at all the criteria for like what is rated R and what's PG-13, and they catered it to PG-13, with all the excess blood and guts and gore and sex and swearing.
Right.
I don't remember much swearing, but yeah, a lot. I mean, there was some awesome creatures and visuals in this movie. Um, I'm sure we'll talk about a few of them a little later.
Speaking of Harold, this first death, I think this is the first death. I can't remember the kid's name now, but he's a jerk. They set him up. It was a perfect prank because they just knew this kid was going to try to steal their candy, and so they have the bag ready, but it's full of poop, and he's not happy about it. That was a great prank, and then, of course, it goes badly from there.
I think the kid took it a little far. He was in the beginning fishing his own crap out of a toilet. I mean that's aggressive. I don't know what happened before. The history with these two kids. I think. Well, he said the other kid once farted in his milk cart and made him drink it. So I mean, maybe this is all fair game, but I mean, maybe just use dog poop or something. I don't know.
It is commitment though to like literally fish your own poop out of the toilet, like you said. Like that's pretty gross. So this kid, he is drunk. It's Halloween. He's walking these eggs. People have chickens and they got to deliver these eggs. He's walking them through the cornfield, and Harold is ready to get his revenge.
Yes, Harold. The kid's drunk to start with, so he's all staggering around, and I think I think you see Harold kind of start moving, coming to life, and then the thing with a lot of the monsters in this movie move really slowly, which is kind of even more creepy, but they're still hard to get away from. And he had a pitchfork, and he thought, okay, I'm just gonna take the pitchfork and kill Harold. He got him, thought it was over, but then Harold grabbed the pitchfork, turned it on him, and it was actually pretty cool. See, this is another thing with the PG-13. He got stabbed with a pitchfork, but no blood came out. He started filling up with straw like a scarecrow, and he basically turned into a scarecrow. Like straw was coming out of his mouth, and Kelly will tell you the rest.
No, I love that. I love that he became the scarecrow, and then it was even his Letterman's jacket on the scarecrow. Then in the next scene, when they're like, oh, what happened to him?
That made me really wonder about the police. Like the scarecrow, they couldn't find the kid. They're like, whoa, we don't know what happened to this kid. And on this kid's own property was a scarecrow wearing his Letterman's jacket. Like, come on, cops.
I mean, it's good for the plot if they don't know. Speaking of scarecrows, though, I think that they're so creepy. One of my all-time greatest memories, we talked about it early in the podcast, was Night of the Dark Scarecrow. I look back on that movie with fondness, and then there's a newer movie called Scarecrows also that I appreciate. So give me more creepy scarecrow action. I like it.
Definitely. And on that same, I think in this movie they picked out things that are creepy in general. to scare the audience. Another thing I've seen in a lot of horror movies that's creepy is like a music box thing. It's like so innocent. It's like a kid's toy, and it, makes that soft like music, and there's something dancing. But there's, for whatever reason, there's just something unnerving about it.
Yeah, it's a nice little touch. I kind of skipped over how they went into this abandoned house and, of course, found the book. And I was wondering if you ever explored abandoned houses in your neighborhood. I mean, you lived in more of a neighborhood. So living in the country, we absolutely did have abandoned houses, and I would explore them. There was even this house that was close to where I went to school, and these friends of mine, they were probably just messing with me. I mean, they were definitely messing with me now that I look back on it. They said that they like went into the abandoned house and they found a Ouija board and they tried to get rid of the Ouija board and it kept coming back. I mean, that's just the plot of a horror movie, but little second grade Kelly was like eating it up.
That definitely sounds scary. This may make me sound like a douchebag, but in my neighborhood, we used to play in houses that were being built.
Oh no.
And this is a little off topic, but so we were playing in this house that was being built, and we were just complete like little asshole kids, and we were, for whatever reason, throwing rocks at it. It was just like a wooden structure without windows, but the guy who was buying the house or building the house was there unbeknownst to us. And he's like, hey, and we like ran away, and I still remember the visual. The guy was running like a deer through the woods. He was like so fast. We hid, and he caught up to us, and he's like breathing really hard. He's like, I just want to be a good neighbor. I just want to be a good neighbor. So we're like, we felt pretty bad. I mean, we were bad kids.
Something I've realized about you, and even on this podcast, a lot of your childhood stories involve you running away from some adult because you're always getting in trouble.
Yeah, we were bad. I think we were just bored. Like, we didn't have PlayStation 4s. We could go on the internet. We didn't have iPhones.
So, see, this is the opposite of that argument of like, oh, if you don't have technology, you'd be out in the neighborhood. Yeah, raising heck.
Yeah, I mean, we played like a ton of different sports like baseball, football, basketball, but sometimes you just get bored and you have to go, throw rocks at a house or whatever.
Oh, man. Okay, so speaking of this 1968 pre-cell phone era, they end up having to do some old school research, which I love. They're actually in the library. But there's the other thing, the other news that came out this week is that Disney owns the rights to Home Alone now, and they're going to reboot it for the modern era. But Macaulay Culkin tweeted out a picture of himself like on the computer. He's like, yeah, this is what Home Alone looks like now. But how are they going to get around the thing with cell phones? Like, I mean, doesn't it seem like pretty obvious that a kid would be able to, get in contact if he needed to, or the parent?
Yeah, there's so many different forms of social media now. It seems pretty hard to believe you couldn't go on Insta or Twitter or Facebook or something to find your mom if you were left behind. But so it'll be very interesting if they do set it in the modern time as to how they do that. But the magic of Hollywood is such that I am confident that they will do a good job with it, and it will be a great film.
Yeah, it's not for us to solve, I guess. It's the screenwriter to solve. So I won't worry another moment about it. This next, it's not a death, it's a near death. Well, I don't know if it's the next one, but it's the next one that I want to talk about. It's the woman with the missing toe. She is missing her toe, and this is the story you remember, right, from your childhood?
I don't know if we briefly want to just describe to the listeners like how this all works with the book, and that the stories are written, like you can see them being written as they're happening to somebody.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, I assume if you're listening to this, you've seen it, but no, that's a good point to bring that up.
Well, anyway, yeah, so the person, Stella with the book, usually will see what's happening and see the words being written. So she saw that her friend Augie was about to eat a toe in some stew and called him up and said, don't eat anything, don't eat anything. And he's like, yeah, whatever. And then he eats a toe. But anyway, this story was in the scary stories to read in the Dark book that I had when I was a kid, the one about the toe. And the person comes in like from a long way, where's my toe? Where's my toe? And then they're all outside the door, and then they're like right by you. And when you're reading it to somebody, you're supposed to like at the very end like jump at them and say, "It was you." So that's how it ends.
There was a really great ghost story that a camp counselor told me one summer, and it always stuck with me, and I always retold it when I had the chance to tell ghost stories. But it was so long and slow and anticipation building, and it literally just ended with a jump scare of like yelling boo at the end. And, so you never knew what it was that was stalking them or that was coming after them. But it was so effective. But I feel like that's sort of cheating. I don't know, but I like it.
Yeah.
So speaking of this toe, I was thinking, and I'm a vegetarian if you've listened to this before. So to me, human meat is just as gross as animal meat. And just within this past week, Impossible Burgers are now available at Burger King. So like those are the things I care about. But anyway, I just thought it was gross on any sort of level.
Yeah, I mean, that was a good scene. So you could see the kid pouring the stew, and you could kind of see the toe in there, and just the visual of that toe coming out of his mouth, and him like looking at it and realizing what it was was pretty gruesome. And then there was an eyeball and other body parts you could see in the stew, and it was kind of funny because his mom and her boyfriend went out of town, and he was talking to her on the phone. And he's looking through the fridge. He's like, "Oh, I'll just eat this stew." And his mom's like, "What? What stew?" He's like, "Whatever. I'm just gonna eat it."
Gross. Yeah, I don't know. I would have avoided that. Um, they everybody has their own creature or thing that they're scared of. The sister, she's got that huge zit that keeps getting worse, and then that's pretty disgusting. There's that weird looking woman, and like you were talking about when we talked about this movie afterwards about he's trying to avoid the red room, yet he ends up, getting facing his fear there. And then there's the guy who's just a bunch of severed body parts coming together. Like everything is it's really cool. It's things that I haven't necessarily seen before, and especially all together in one movie.
Definitely a lot of things that I've never really seen. I mean, I don't know how they thought of these things, but they were very visually disturbing and scary, but they weren't overly gory or anything. So especially the Red Room one, it was just a slow moving like obese woman, like with like a blank weird face. And every corner you turn, she was just slowly walking at you, and then right when she got up to the kid, he was just consumed like somehow into her body without being eaten or anything.
I know. I don't know. It was just really well done. And like you said, nothing was extremely grotesque or bloody or anything, but it was haunting and gave you that sense of dread without being, having to rely on, cheap thrills, for example.
Yeah, and I like these like deaths in these movies, certain movies that are like preordained, and even if you know about them, like this kid knew to avoid the red room because he knew he was gonna die in the red room. So there was this records room called like the RED room, and he's like, "I'm not going in there. I'm not going in there." So he didn't go with the other people, and he ended up in that red or in a hallway, and they turned the alarm on, and all the red lights turned on, and he's like, "Oh God." So I like stuff that's like this. Like the story was written, and there was pretty much no way he could have gotten out of it.
Yes, I love that too. It's like Final Destination, or just like this preordained fate. I was a philosophy minor in college. I don't admit that to many
Whoa.
people.
You're
I mean,
finally using it?
yeah, but it's like, the sisters just deciding, people's fate. They just cut the ribbon, and that's when your life is going to end, and it, doesn't really have any rhyme or reason to it. And it's like, are we destined to live a certain life or die at a certain time and we can't change it? And then what if we do? I love stuff like that. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, and it's like even if you know about it, for some of these you could change it. A little later in the movie, they kind of got out of some stuff. The girl with the spiders coming out of her face didn't die. So, I mean, I guess they helped her there with the book, but they set it up. Spoiler alert, obviously too late to say that, but they set it up kind of for a sequel at the end.
Yes.
One question I had is these people just seem to be randomly chosen to die. So how did Sarah pick who would die in these stories and when and how?
Well, is it the people that like trespassed into that house? Did that have something to do with it?
Yes, everyone who was picked to die was in that house trespassing. Except for the cop who just got in the way and got his neck snapped.
Yeah, so it must have to do with that. I need to probably watch it again, or maybe I should read the stories to get all of that lore and backstory. But I was just watching it and enjoying it and not thinking too much about all those little intricacies. So, it didn't really bother me.
I just thought it was interesting. Like, first the kid who was a huge a-hole died, so that was fine. But then, like, they just started picking the friends, and I was like, oh, okay. But they never picked Stella, did they, or did they?
Well, I mean, isn't the Stella's thing was she got back and pulled into, back in time and was sort of living. I mean, I don't know that was her story, but she was living that and seeing what happened to, what was her name? Sarah Bellows?
Yes, I believe, yeah, her last name was Bellows. And yeah, that was probably my favorite scene in the movie is when she was in the abandoned house and all of a sudden it turned back to the 1890s. Everything was nice. And she was in there with her brothers who ran the paper mill that was poisoning the town. And they ended up basically framing the sister for murder of these kids because she was going to spill the beans and tell everyone that the mill was polluting the water and killing everybody and that they had to do something about it.
Yeah, I love this, and doing research for our book that's coming out in February, The Science of Women in Horror. I noticed that this is one of those tropes in horror movies and Gothic literature in general, but it's women not being believed or being told, that they can't, have their voice heard, and so she was silenced in the ultimate way, but so their ghosts come back to avenge them, and she tells Stella at the end, tell the truth, tell the stories that need to be heard. And Stella's writing them, and she says, at the end, not everyone is believing them, but I'm getting them out there. And that was the perfect setup for hopefully a series of sequels, because they obviously have more stories to tell.
That was kind of cool how Sarah was writing these stories and Stella was an aspiring horror writer, so the torch just got passed to her. And then Stella said she'd tell her story to like clear her name, and that kind of appeased her. So that was a good kind of a conclusion to Sarah's story.
Yes, it was good. There's one trope that was present in the movie, so I'm gonna dock it a little bit for this. And I don't know if it's in the original source material in the books or not, but again, when we were doing research for this next book, we learned about that African American women are often portrayed as a magical character, and there's I don't know if they refer to her as an oracle in this movie, but instead of having different character traits that just sort of portrayed as this stereotype of having magical powers. So I'm glad the character exists, but it did fall into that problematic trope.
One thing that was kind of cool about that character though was that in the 1890s flashback you saw that character as like a 10-year-old girl when Stella hid under the table and then she wouldn't tell where she was. So that was kind of a cool like connection to see first the lady when she was like 80 or 90 and then seeing her when she was 10 in the flashback.
Yeah, that was very cool.
I think one thing we didn't mention yet is that my guy Hank from Breaking Bad was her dad in the movie, so I'm glad he's moving along with his career. And
Oh yes, Dean Norris. I think he's on a TV show now too. I mean, he's got work. He's doing fine. But yes, he was the dad, and that was an interesting relationship too. You know, her mom had died, um, and so they had. It wasn't just like a stereotypical uh, father-daughter relationship on screen. I liked it.
I thought he could have been in the movie maybe a little bit more. He's always at work though. But yeah, it was good to see him in something. And yeah, I mean, she kept blaming herself. They didn't go too much, I don't think, into what really happened to her mom, but she kept blaming herself for everything. And I think maybe at the end she realized that it really wasn't her fault.
Yeah, you know, it had several great messages throughout the movie, and they did it in a way that was it made sense for the story and for the characters.
Definitely, yeah. Just looking through my notes here, I wrote down racist cops, so maybe you want to expand on that?
Oh yeah, remember they were being mean to Ramon because they were calling him a draft dodger and just being the worst. And I guess that's, you know, era, but it was powerful because of the parallels between things that are in the news now and things that were happening then.
It was kind of interesting at the end that he ended up enlisting and then getting on a bus to go into the military. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to conclude his story.
It was, and it's funny. I mean, it's not funny. It's interesting that this was exactly around the time that my dad ended up being enlisted to go to Vietnam. So this is right around our both of all of our parents' era. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad, I think he was in the Navy briefly as an officer, and he like didn't know what he was doing. And he said these people were saluting him and stuff because he was an officer, and like he he felt uncomfortable. So I don't think his military career was very very long or distinguished. But
Oh man, and your mom was in the Navy too, right?
my mom was in the Navy for a little bit longer. She never went over to Vietnam, but not exactly. I should probably ask her again what she was doing during that time. She lived in San Diego on a naval base, and my uncle Dave was in the Navy too on a ship outside of Vietnam, and my uncle Mike was in Vietnam. So we have a lot of military connections, myself not included.
I know we have all these stories to be learning. You know, we need to start a second podcast that's called like Vietnam Stories or something, and just interview all of the our parents and aunts and uncles who were in the war at that time. My goodness.
Yeah, and my grandpa was on Normandy Beach. I don't think it was on D-Day. It might have been on D-Day, but it wasn't in the first wave. But he was also involved in D-Day, so you know.
My grandpa was in World War II as well. Like, these stories. Okay, well, yeah, that's very interesting. What else do you have to say about scary stories to tell in the dark?
I think that's about all I have written down. Yeah, I can't think of much else, I guess.
So let's rank this movie on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 being you hated it, 10 being you think it's a perfect movie. What should our scale be? Is there an image or something that stands out to you from the movie?
The most distinct image I had from this movie was the Harold, the scarecrow. I mean, they did a great job. Even early on, before he was alive, he seemed scary, just sitting there with those bugs crawling around on him. So I thought that was the most iconic image of the whole thing.
Let's use Harold. And you know, it's funny because even though I'm saying scarecrows are creepy AF and he was, I still love him and I don't want people to be mean to him.
Yeah, it's like, how are you rooting for this inanimate object to kill this kid? But
Because that guy's a jerk and Harold is not.
that's true. That's true.
Okay, so let's rank this movie on Heralds. How many Heralds do you give Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark?
I think I'm gonna go with 8 heralds out of 10 heralds. It was very good. It was well shot. Everything quality. Everything seemed authentic to 1968. I'm just not gonna give it the last two Heralds just because it just maybe the PG-13 thing would come into play there. I don't know. I mean, if they could maybe they could have gone a little further with the rated R with some of the stuff, but I mean the story was good and kept my interest the whole time. Yeah.
I am going to give it 9 out of 10 Heralds. I think it was beautifully shot, well acted, brilliantly written. It was so good. And I read today a critic said this is like the perfect gateway horror movie. And maybe it's not meant for hardcore horror fans and not meant for people who want that gore factor. But for like these middle school age or this 13 and up crowd that they want to delve into horror a little bit, but you don't want to show them Dead Alive for their first horror movie, then this might be the perfect one. And so I'm not giving it that perfect 10 out of 10 though because of the couple of problematic things, but I still loved it.
Yeah, everything you said there. I mean, great movie for that, yeah, younger generation. Not overly scary, not overly gory. I think, yeah, a good starter movie if you want to get your kid going with horror movies. This is a nice introduction, I think.
And I think, so our 6-year-old, she likes scary things. This is not one that I would show her. So just, here's that parent tip. Our 12-year-old, though, I think will definitely be able to handle it. He was supposed to go with me last night, but he's sick right now, so poor baby. But I would definitely not recommend it for younger kids. I don't think that they could handle it.
No, no, no. Definitely, I don't know. Probably 13 and up. Just kidding.
Yeah, like maybe the rating is exactly right.
Or yeah, yeah. I mean, go see it. Bring your kids as long as they're 12, 13, and get some popcorn and enjoy the movie.
Yeah, we had a fun night. So, if you haven't seen the movie yet, I mean, we gave you a ton of spoilers, but I assume that you have seen it if you're listening to this. Make sure to check out our website, and it gives you all the information about our books coming out and appearances that we'll be at and everything coming up with Horror Rewind. And follow us on social media. We're always posting some fun stuff on there, and um, you can see what movies we're reviewing next. So, until next time, we'll see you in the horror section.
Bye.